Mr. President, fellow Toastmasters and guests, I came across this book last summer at the airport, Julie and Julia by Julie Powell. It's a book written about another book by Julia Child. She wrote a book called Mastering the Art of French Cooking, which was in fact teaching the whole of America how to cook French food. Julie Powell's life at the time had hit rock bottom, and on top of that, the Twin Towers fell down right where she lived. Her life just couldn't get worse. And then she stumbled across this book, and she read it. She couldn't put it down. And she started thinking, I wonder how many people cook more than one or two of these recipes. They really are very demanding. And she challenged herself. She challenged herself to cook all 527 of the recipes in 1 year. And this was holding down a really terrible job, full-time job, as well as living in a tiny little garret in New York. And that summer was pushing 40 most of the time. But she did it, and while she did it, she wrote a blog. The blog was picked up by the media, that was turned into a book, and now it's going to be turned into a film. Although it is a cookery book, essentially, she does swear a huge amount. I've picked out the only chapter with no swearing in it, but it is, as I have explained, a very adult nature. I'm sure nobody here will be offended at all. The chapter I've chosen to read is called Hacking the Marrow Out of Life. 4 days after they'd arrived, I loaded my parents onto a plane back to Austin. I couldn't face my mother screaming at me one more time, Julie, you have got to stop cooking all the time. I'd finished all the egg, soup, fish and chicken recipes, and I felt like a real challenge. Steak with beef marrow sauce. The first obstacle in a bout with a marrow bone is simply arranging a match. I lived in New York, not Paris, and this was 2002, not 1961. Marrow bones, I discovered, did not grow on trees. So I put Eric, my long-suffering husband, onto the case. After work, he headed off to Astoria, where he felt sure lots of good Jewish immigrants were bound to still do proper cooking. No luck. Then Heathcliff, my brother, got in on the act. Eric caught the train to Upper East Side, and Heathcliff caught one to West Village. They were very late. I assumed this was good news and got on with the project. Stand the bone on one end and split it with a cleaver, wrote Julia, sounding ever so confident and blithe. I could think of one possible wrinkle right off the bat, which was that I had no cleaver. At that moment the door swung open and Eric and Heathcliff strode through like Arctic explorers in from the cold. Eric bore his plastic bag before him like a prized ice core sample. He was no doubt expecting a thankful kiss, at the very least. Probably a good deal more. Who's the man? He bellowed. You got it, you got it! I sure as hell did. He cackled, he even did a little dance. It's time to extract the beef marrow. My largest knife was a carving one, with a serrated edge. 9 inches long. The blade was 1.5 inches at its widest point. I'd always thought it rather grand, daunting sort of knife, but after one look, from what I could see, it was not nearly tool enough for the job. Split it with a cleaver, my arse. For a moment, Eric and Heathcliff stood over the bone in silence. Eric rested his chin on his hand, thoughtfully. Heathcliff scratched the back of his head. Do you have a jigsaw? Heathcliff asked. For 20 minutes the two of them went back and forth with the saw, until both of them were dripping with sweat. They cut into the thing about 1 inch. The oozy pink stuff on the blade of the saw was, though exactly what we were looking for, truly horrifying. The boys went a little green. Hell, give it to me. I decided to go at it with my smallest paring knife, right inside the bone. Slowly and painfully, I wormed my way up into its interior. I clawed the stuff out. bit by painful pink bit, until my knife was sunk into the leg bone, up past the hilt. It made a dreadful scraping noise. I felt that I could feel it in the centre of my bones. How much more interior can you get than the interior of bones? It's the centre of the centre of things. If it were a memory, it would be your first, most painful memory, the most repressed one, the one that has made you who you are. So, there I was, scooping out the centre of things, thinking mostly that it was some nasty pink shit, very wet, not liquid, but not really solid either, grey clots of stuff that plopped down on my chopping board with a sickening thud. The boys looked mesmerised. It's true, I am a fanatical eater of flesh, but bone